We have finally seen raw gameplay from Alan Wake 2, thanks to Remedy's presentation at Summer Game Fest and some B-roll footage that they authorized for press use after that event. There is a lot to discuss, so let's just get into it. The live presentation was pretty brief. We got just under 3 minutes of gameplay and about 5 minutes of interview time with Sam Lake. I'm going to attempt to break it all down, and I'll also be referring back to the gameplay trailer that they released a few weeks ago. I did cover that in a previous video, but I actually missed a handful of really interesting things, so stay tuned to the end to find out what those are. There were also a few subtle reveals in the Alan Wake 2 behind the scenes video posted recently by Remedy, so we'll also cover some of that. I usually wait until the end of the video to make any plugs, but I just want to say, if you're enjoying the videos, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And if you're in a position to help the channel grow, check out the Patreon and our channel memberships. We have a lot of ambitious ideas for this channel, and the support we've been receiving so far has brought us closer to those goals. But the more support we receive, the more we can do. Anyway, enough about us, let's talk about Alan Wake 2. First off, Sam Lake revealed a bit about the structure of the game, stating that players will have a lot of agency in how they choose to play, because there will be points where you can switch between Alan and Saga. But he also said that you could choose to play as either of the characters for the majority of the game. Honestly, I found his wording here to be pretty confusing, but I also think that what Remedy is trying to accomplish with Alan Wake 2 might be kind of unprecedented. I really struggle to think of any other games that have two protagonists, each in their own separate worlds, that also allow you to freely switch between the characters. There are games like GTA 5 or even Maniac Mansion that allow you to switch between characters, but in those games, everyone is sharing a general physical space. And in a game like The Medium, the characters are in different realms, but those realms directly mirror one another. And it seems like Alan and Saga are in very distinctly different areas. Remedy created a 30-minute hands-off demo for the press to view, and the subsequent coverage of that demo explained things a bit better. Essentially, there are going to be safe rooms that you can find throughout the map, and at those safe rooms you can choose to switch between Alan and Saga. There was also a moment at Summer Game Fest where Jeff Keighley suggested that Saga Anderson would be experiencing a narrative written by Alan Wake, which Sam Lake kinda dodged, and that makes me wonder if that's either something he wasn't ready to outright state, or if the actual scenario is much more complicated than that. Coverage by Games Radar also suggested outright that Saga Anderson may entirely be a character written by Alan Wake, although that theory was neither confirmed nor denied by Remedy. With Saga partnered with Alex Casey, I do have to question which plane of reality she's on. How will the story reconcile Alex Casey existing both as a person and a literary character? It's impossible to say right now with full certainty, but I do have a theory that I'd like to share with you. It's been put forward many times over the years through different fan theories that Alan Wake may be clairvoyant, meaning that he can derive information about people, places, or things through some sort of extrasensory perception. I never really disagreed with that theory, but I also never really had it click for me in a way where I could see how it all fit together with everything else I knew about the game. A lot of people who played both Alan Wake and Control would point to the fact that some of Alan's writing directly mimicked the events of the game, as if he wrote those events and then in turn created those characters and scenarios, which kind of cheapened the overall experience for anyone who interpreted it that way. I knew something was up with all that writing, but I never really knew how to nail it down until something clicked for me earlier this morning. Alan Wake Remastered contains links to 3 unlisted YouTube videos. These are titled Vision 1, Vision 2, and Vision 3. The videos are very clearly setting up the basic plot of Alan Wake 2. The deal that Remedy made with Epic was to publish both the remaster of and the sequel to Alan Wake, so this whole thing has been in motion for quite a while. The first vision has Alan Wake talking about writing the Alex Casey books, and Alan says that the Dark Place kinda took those hard-boiled detective novels and used them to create a nightmare world around him, and that Alan would need a detective to guide him. That's a setup that should seem pretty familiar to anyone who's been paying attention to the Alan Wake 2 coverage so far. The second video states that Alan can see visions, carried by the ebb and flow of different dream states. They seep into the dark place from reality. Sometimes these are connected to things he knew from his life before he entered the dark place. But he also says that some of the visions are of things that he seemingly had no connection to. We know from the first game and from the Alan Wake Files book that Alan was sharing a dream space with the Alan Wake Files author, Clay Stewart. So already right there is some evidence that Alan has a very unique connection to the minds and experiences and feelings of other people. He talks about using those visions in his writing to aid him in his attempts to escape the dark place. This is the sort of thing we saw him doing in Control. He took things he knew to be true, and then he put those elements in his stories in an attempt to bend reality. When Alan wrote about the FBC, he wasn't inventing the FBC, he received a vision of the FBC, and he put it into his story. Now, Alan didn't have any direct connection to the FBC that he was aware of, but the FBC did have direct interactions with Hartman and Alice Wake, so there is a sort of, chain of connections happening through people close to Alan, connecting him to the FBC. Maybe? Now, the stories that Alan wrote about the FBC clearly had an effect on the events of Control, but those characters in Control still had full autonomy. Alan could only attempt to intervene in their lives. That's maybe a topic for a different video, but the last line in this vision video really hammers home what I'm trying to get at. Alan says, "Had I always written this way, even before? Seen things without realizing I was seeing them, thinking they were mine. Was this what inspiration was for me?" To me, this is suggesting that even before entering the dark place, Alan Wake had clairvoyant visions of the future and other people and events, and used those in his writing. And he didn't interpret them as clairvoyant visions, he just thought that that was how his imagination worked, and it was just part of his creative process. Alan used those skills and visions to create the Alex Casey novels, and he likely used the same process to create nearly all of his other creative works as well. Alan Wake was identified by the FBC as a powerful para-utilitarian, and he was part of the same Prime Candidate program as Jesse Faden from Control. Alan uses the Dark Place and its powers, but even before entering the Dark Place, he already had strong paranatural abilities, and I believe that it's only through this prolonged 13 years of isolation in the Dark Place that he's started to understand the full nature of his visions. This could explain why there's an FBI agent named Alex Casey appearing in Alan Wake 2. Alan could have been writing those Alex Casey novels about a real person, but just wasn't aware that Alex Casey was a real person. I really think that this is what Remedy has been trying to communicate to us about Alan's powers all along. And there's also mention of it in some of the most recent Alan Wake 2 footage.
The writer of these pages knows what will happen. Because they're behind this, or because they can see what's coming.
Now, all that said, I could be totally wrong about everything. But I've looked at this theory from pretty much every angle, and it seems to mesh with everything else I know to be true about the game and the RCU. But hey, let me know what you think. I could be wrong, but I feel pretty good about this theory at the moment. Anyway, we know from the trailer that the characters in this game are stuck in a horror story, and I kinda get the impression that there could be another editor figure influencing Alan's writing in this game, kinda like how Barbara Jagger influenced the writing in the first game. And speaking of Barbara Jagger, one of the things that I missed in my analysis of the gameplay trailer was what appears to be a direct reference to Barbara Jagger. I saw this image posted on The Sudden Stop, and The Sudden Stop is one of the best resources online for Remedy fans. I went back and checked my copy of the trailer, and I could not find this scene. I was stumped, but I decided to go back to YouTube, and lo and behold, the version of the trailer uploaded to the PlayStation YouTube channel is different than the one used on AlanWake.com and on the Remedy YouTube channel. The PlayStation version of the trailer is the same one that was included in the PlayStation Showcase stream where the trailer first debuted, which makes me wonder if this image was intentionally left out of the other cut of the trailer. There were a few other very minor changes between these two trailers, but these two signs here seem to be the most drastic change. As Saga blasts this enemy with her shotgun, we can see a couple of signs. The one on the right says ladle, which might seem odd, but we'll come back to that later. The sign to the left appears to show a woman dressed similarly to Barbara Jagger, with a hole in her chest. For anyone who is unfamiliar, Barbara Jagger is the main antagonist of the first Alan Wake game, except she isn't really Barbara Jagger. It's a long and convoluted story, but essentially, a poet named Thomas Zane used the powers of Cauldron Lake to resurrect his dead girlfriend, Barbara Jagger. However, the version of Jagger that came back to him was evil, and so to get rid of her, he cut her heart out, tied himself to her, and drowned the both of them in Cauldron Lake. Cauldron Lake is a threshold, and it connects our reality to another realm called the Dark Place, and the Dark Presence is an entity that lives in the Dark Place. The Dark Presence used the form of Barbara Jagger to manipulate Alan Wake into writing a story that would allow for the Dark Presence to enter reality. I believe that the Dark Presence is still working toward that goal in Alan Wake 2, and from the looks of things, it's made significant progress. We recently learned that this enemy is actually a victim of the Cult of the Tree, who was somehow reanimated and has now come back as one of the Taken. He too appears to have had his heart removed, as there's clearly some kind of cavity in his chest. Once the darkness is broken off of this enemy, it seems to reveal a hole in his chest that more darkness is leaking out of. Saga refers to this enemy as a cultist and a monster, like Nightingale, and she's referring to former FBI agent Robert Nightingale, who was pursuing Alan in the first game. We get a glimpse of the combat here, and we can see that the flashlight batteries don't replenish in the same way they did in Alan Wake 1. And it looks like concentrated blasts from the flashlight will deplete an entire bar on the meter down here, and that each battery has 4 charges. That might be something that changes over the course of the game, because in some of the B-roll footage that I mentioned earlier, we can see that Saga can use manuscript fragments to upgrade her weapons, so there will definitely be some sort of upgrade systems in this game. We also see that Saga can utilize the classic Alan Wake dodge, and the final shot here appears to be a headshot, which suggests to me that aiming could be a lot more important in Alan Wake 2 than it was in the first game, where I never really felt like it mattered where I hit an enemy, they just always took the same number of hits no matter what. After disposing of this enemy, Saga enters the general store and looks around a bit. She focuses her light on the chest freezer and finds a heart, which initially was very confusing, but the B-roll footage that came out the day after this gameplay was revealed let us know that this is actually the heart of Robert Nightingale. We can see that there are a variety of items for Saga to interact with here. And when she interacts with the heart, she says, "I knew it would be here, like I saw it in a dream." So we've got this cultist, who, according to Saga, is a monster like Nightingale. And we can assume that both of them had had their hearts removed, just like what happened to Barbara Jagger. I still don't really know the full significance of all of that, but hearing about how the cult's victim was reanimated really made me think of that third vision from the Alan Wake Remastered vision videos. In this last vision, Alan describes a person waking up in a forest. Dark waves have washed their memory away. They are naked and crawling to the shore. The person remembers darkness and runs to the forest to a fate worse than death. What would be a fate worse than death? Could it possibly be being murdered by a cult, having your heart cut out, and then being reanimated and transformed into a monster? I believe that this vision is describing the ritualistic murder and subsequent transformation of Robert Nightingale. And if we look at it through that lens, this has all been laid out for us already in the video and stills released by Remedy up until this point. I made a video back in April where I shared some of my predictions for Alan Wake 2, and so far, some of them have been very accurate. I proposed that we might play as Saga Anderson in the game, that we might be taking on the Cult of the Tree, and that Robert Nightingale might return for some sort of mid-game boss fight. Well, it's been confirmed that the gameplay demo shown to the press this week ended with a Nightingale boss fight. Now, there's been a little bit of confusion about this because it seems like Nightingale is actually portrayed by a different actor, and that's why people didn't really recognize him at first, but if we put all of these pieces together along with the footage and the B-roll and the gameplay trailer, I'm pretty sure it's Nightingale. I didn't think it was, but I don't see how it couldn't be considering everything we're looking at here. In terms of the boss fight, Nightingale is being referred to as an overlap guardian. According to Games Radar, the overlaps are places where reality and the dark place have grown close together, and you'll have to defeat their guardians to push back the dark floodwaters. The concept sounds very similar to the cleansing points in Control, and the idea of reality and the dark place having points where they come right up against one another is a core concept of Alan Wake's American Nightmare. For a long time, there were a lot of fans who felt like American Nightmare was not canon, but Sam Lake announced on Twitter a while back that the game is in fact canon, and I would strongly recommend it to anyone getting ready to play Alan Wake 2. In that game, Alan uses manuscript pages to guide his actions, essentially having to use clues and deduction to fill in some of the gaps, and create a scenario that matches what was written on the page. This same process appears to be at the center of Saga Anderson's campaign. Remedy revealed this scene, where Saga approaches a hut, and she says that the page described the hut as being lit. She then says that the page mentioned a fuse, prompting the player to light the hut so that it matches the description found in the manuscript page. We also found out that Saga can enter a physical manifestation of her mind. It's called her mind place. It acts as a hub for all of the documents, videos, and other collectibles and clues that the player will find. Saga can also use this space to profile persons of interest and gain more information on the case, which, if I correctly understand what I'm seeing here, it feels reminiscent of the hotline calls from Control. The shots of the Mind Place that Remedy has provided give us a lot of information, and it also gives us a glimpse into how Saga's portion of the game will feel and play to a degree. Essentially, progress in her campaign is tied directly to her investigation, meaning that you can't really move forward to your next objective until you use your clues and deductive reasoning to figure out what that next objective even is. This process seems to work in tandem with the matching the manuscript page process that I described earlier. The wall here is covered in different clues. While I have gone out of my way to exhaustively cover scenes like this in the past, it seems like most of the information here is basically directly related to the few scenes of the game that we're already familiar with. There are notes about Nightingale and the other murder victims. We learned that at some point a manuscript page was shoved into Nightingale's chest, and there are various questions and autopsy photos. There is writing tattooed onto Nightingale's heart, which is very intriguing, and it makes me wonder if somehow words are literally being channeled from the dark place into reality. And if so, who's writing it? Is it Alan, or could it be someone else? Remember that ladle sign that I mentioned earlier from the gameplay trailer? Well, here on the wall, there's mention of a witch's ladle, and having the ladle sign next to Barbara Jagger, who herself is an echo of a witch named Baba Yaga from folklore, it's kind of all coming together, but that term, witch's ladle, also appeared on a promotional poster that was sent out for the release of Alan Wake Remastered. Some influencers received this swag package from Remedy, and there's a lot of interesting clues about what we'll see in Alan Wake 2 that were kind of hinted at in the remaster, but I'll link to a really great Reddit thread about this whole package down in the description of this video. Going back to the wall, there's a bit here about needing to perform a ritual to enter the overlap. And I'm really curious about that, but ultimately, rather than try to derive meaning from every little thing in this scene, I'll just say that Remedy is clearly creating a very novel system here. It was reported that they spent 18 months tweaking this Mind Place system, and so far from what I've seen, it reminds me of the ambitiousness of the Thought Catalog from Disco Elysium. And if you're looking for another detective story to pass the time while we wait for Alan Wake 2 to come out, I would strongly recommend playing Disco Elysium. Before moving on, I do want to mention one particular piece of evidence on the board. It's a quote from a character named Thornton, who is a Bright Falls sheriff deputy, and we last heard from him in the Alan Wake comics. I get the impression that we'll see a few more of these sort of auxiliary characters pop up throughout Alan Wake 2. I read that Alan will also have his own mind space, and that makes sense because when you look at Saga's mind space, it really seems to mirror the space that we've seen Alan occupy in the trailer. There's a deer theme in Saga's space and an owl theme in Alan's space, and we see that same theme repeated in the special pre-order weapon skins available for each character. And I don't mean to get too into the weeds, but a parliament is a group of owls. Alan lives in Parliament Tower. If you look at the refrigerator in Alan Wake Remastered, there's a note from the building management. There's an owl in the logo. There's something going on there, all right? That's another thread for you to go check out. The rest of the B-roll footage we have shows Saga walking around with Alex Casey, which is awesome. I just love hearing James McCaffrey in that role. We also see a bit more combat from Saga, and I've read that in general, there's less combat in this game than in the previous game, which I welcome. I think that in general, the combat in Alan Wake is one of the more kind of divisive and heavily criticized aspects of the game. Reportedly, the combat that does appear in Alan Wake 2 will be much more intense than in the first game. We can see Alex Casey and Saga Anderson entering an area that was condemned by the FBC, and I'm very excited to learn more about the role that the FBC will play in this game. Lastly, we see a shot of Saga approaching what I assume is the overlap, and I can't help but be reminded of Control when I see this red light. I was already excited for Alan Wake 2, but seeing more of Saga in action, especially in this sort of detective mode, has me entirely sold on the game. I mean, I was already committed to continuing Alan's journey, but the inclusion of Saga as a second protagonist was something that I was just feeling a lot more neutral about until now. Seeing her come into the story as a total newcomer is a great way to welcome new players who are unfamiliar with the first Alan Wake game and the whole Remedy connected universe. And the more I think about it, if they didn't include a character like her to kind of guide new people, I think the game would be really off-putting for a lot of people, even people who played the original Alan Wake. It could have been 13 years since they first played it, and so having a primer and a refresher on all that stuff, I think is going to do the game a big favor. I also know that a lot of Remedy fans, myself included, come to these games with a sort of detective-like mindset, and so to have the detective mechanics be at the core of this game, there's a really neat meta thing happening where that Remedy detective mindset is now actually in the game in a very literal and crucial way. And speaking of that Remedy detective mindset, some folks over on the Remedy Discord noticed some very interesting details in that behind the scenes video that Remedy recently put out. I think that for some people, this could be kind of a big spoiler, so if you don't want to hear it, you can jump to the next section of the video. I'll give you a little countdown. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so there's been a lot of speculation about which characters from the first game will appear in Alan Wake 2. Well, eagle-eyed Remedy fans caught this list of targets in a recent behind-the-scenes video. We can see some unfamiliar names like Abigail and Blum, but we can also see a target named Finding Tor, which I imagine refers to Tor Anderson, as well as Cynthia Power Outage, Searching Cynthia Room, and Cynthia Pursuit, which I think refers to this scene from the trailer. Yes, it appears that Cynthia Weaver was finally taken by the Dark Presence. Now, the figure is pretty difficult to make out, but I don't think that Remedy let this bit of information slip out unintentionally. And so far, pretty much all of the new information we've received seems to loop right back around to all of the other footage that's already been released. You might have also noticed a target named The Janitor Awakens, which I am pretty sure refers to Ah-Tee, the janitor from Control. This theory is supported by the fact that a picture of Ah-Tee's vacation spot appears here on the wall in this scene. Alright, so that little spoiler section is over. So real quick before I get out of here are two more things that I personally missed in the gameplay reveal trailer from a couple weeks ago. Firstly, the word initiation is written on a blackboard on the wall in Alan's room, further advocating for the theory that Alan Wake 2 will focus on Alan engaging in the initiation phase of the hero's journey. But perhaps even more importantly, we can see two people wearing Oh Dear Diner Thermos mascot suits. This is really just wishful thinking right now, but if Alan Wake 2 is going to lean into as many survival horror tropes as I think it will, then I would love to see this thermos costume become available to players to wear throughout the game in one way or another, kind of like Tofu from Resident Evil 2. There is still a lot more to learn about Alan Wake 2. I mean, we've barely seen any of Alan's campaign, and we've really just barely scratched the surface of what the game is going to offer. But with every new information drop, the picture does become a bit more clear, and at this point, I feel pretty content to just kind of wait and see how it all shakes out. However, depending on what else is revealed, I might feel compelled to make another video like this, kind of covering what we've learned so far. A big thanks to everyone who's been reaching out and sending information to me and sharing their theories online. It's really a lot of fun to kind of just hear everybody's perspectives and kind of put this mystery together. And thank you for sticking around the video for this long. If you like it, please subscribe, throw us a like, leave a comment, tell me what you think about Alan Wake 2. And again, if you're in a position to help the channel grow, check out our Patreon, check out the channel memberships. It really helps us out a lot. We've got a Discord if you want to talk about games some more with us, and also we've got a huge backlog of videos, both Remedy related, but also a lot of other games. So if you haven't checked out the Hidden Machine back catalog, why not start right now? See ya!